Right, listen, let's kick this off. I think we've got a decent number of you joined. Well, listen, thank you everybody for joining. Welcome to our webinar on navigating NIS2, your essential survival guide. If you could just pop to the next slide, please, Declan. So I am Kirsten Savage-Lyons. I'll be your host for today. I'm the marketing manager in Ireland for Echo. Joining me here today is Declan Timmins, who is the managing director for professional services in Echo. Declan, if you want to just introduce yourself.
I'm the MD for professional service. We have a team of people who deliver kind of all range of cybersecurity consultancy services, particularly around compliance of NIS2, GDPR, all the usual compliance pieces, plus cyber risk and penetration testing.
Perfect. And Paul Stanley here from the NCSE. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, no problem, Kirsten. Thank you. So the NCSE is a growing organisation. We're up to about 70 staff now, and primarily we would have started off as an incident response unit for government, but now we've moved into, my role is around resilience and engagement with our stakeholders, and then we have a technical side as well that actually helps on the ground if people have issues that they need assistance with. So yeah, it's a fast moving environment at the moment, so there's a lot happening as we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely. And on that note, if anybody has to drop off or they really want to share this with another colleague, we will be sending on the slide deck and the recording later on today or early tomorrow morning. The format today will be slightly different. It won't be a death by PowerPoint. We want to make this as interactive as possible. So I know a number of you have submitted questions to the panel in advance, but if anybody has anything throughout, we'll pose those questions either throughout or at the end, depending on what makes sense. So please do pop anything into the Q&A. We want this to be as valuable for you guys as it possibly can be. I'll just jump onto the agenda then, please, Declan. So what are we going to talk about? First of all, is your sector in scope? I know there's already questions coming in about it's still, people are unsure whether their industry is in scope. So we'll try and address those. How it'll affect your organisation ultimately, and then the boardroom accountability. We'll talk about the top 10 controls, enforcement and penalties that organisations will face, and then how you can address this with a compliance gap analysis and our approach to that. So without further ado, Declan, if you want to kick it off.
Yeah, thanks, Kirsten, and thanks, Paul, for joining us. It's good to have somebody from National Cybersecurity Centre to help us here and to answer some of the questions from our clients and anybody on the webinar. I suppose, as Kirsten said, we're not going to do death by PowerPoint, but just as kind of background, we're just going to run through the main points of NIS2, just so people are still aware of what the requirements are. In previous webinars, we spent a little bit of time in detail and going through the specific requirements, but just kind of a broad level overview. So the first kind of question is really, am I in scope? And am I in scope for being an essential entity or an important entity? And I know, again, National Cyber have put together an in-scope link on their website. Maybe, Paul, you could give us a kind of a background of that.
Yeah, sure. So obviously there's a little bit of figuring out if you actually are in scope or not. Some things are very, very straightforward. For example, when the NIS directive, the original NIS1 came in 2017, there was about 70 entities in Ireland who were kind of essential services that were brought under that umbrella. And then now we feel we're anticipating it's going to widen out to maybe 4,000 or so organizations or businesses. In a way, if you look at it, it's kind of a compliment. If you're being told your business or your service is absolutely essential or important to our modern society, that's why you're being brought up under this umbrella. And the idea is to, what would we say, raise all boats, to get everybody kind of up to a certain base level. The NCSE has worked on that. We've published there the kind of baseline standards that organizations can follow if they're not really sure about security. There's other organizations that maybe have aligned themselves with some security framework like NIST or perhaps ISO 27001, or they've gone the full route and got certified against that. So if you're already in that space and you understand kind of what security is all about, you're well on your way to being compliant if you are in scope. If you're not in scope, it's no harm to know all about this in any way, because it's all best practice for your organization.
Yeah, and I suppose that's a really important point. Like, there's nothing new here. Like, this is another compliance requirement. You know, it's like you should be a mature organization anyway. The controls that are here are nothing. They're the basic controls we'd expect of a pretty mature business in Ireland today. And I suppose, you know, on a positive slant, NIS2 is a law, so you have to comply. You can't get away with it. You know, it is going to come into force regardless. But you know, having a positive slant on that, like, this is Europe saying, you know, let's make Ireland a safe place to do business and attract more investment. So, and the same with all the other countries across Europe. And as you paying your part in that, you know, you're being, you know, a good organization to do business with. That's a good marketing slant for yourself, you know, to make sure, you know, I'm a NIS2 essential entity, and Echo will be a NIS2 essential entity. So, you know, we're embracing that and saying, you know, that's good for us. It's good for our business. It shows we're an absolutely mature organization, and we take our responsibilities of, you know, the data we share or the data we process for organizations, pretty concerned about it. So maybe looking at, you know, how it'll affect your organization, and I see the big one here is senior management accountability, and I think I've spoken this a number of times. Maybe Paul, what's your slant on that? You know, why are we so concerned about that?
Yeah, in a way. Now, in a past life, I've been a kind of managing infrastructure and been very much on the coal face of keeping an organization up and running. And sometimes, as the IT manager, you're kind of, the risks sit with you. Whereas what's happened really with NIS2, it's kind of saying, well, that isn't really fair. We're going to bring this up a level, that senior management have to understand their infrastructure, their data, what are the risks to that, and what mitigations are we putting in place. So I suppose one of the reasons it's a law is that there is this tendency sometimes to delegate things, and you delegate it so much you're very distant from it. So what this is about is that senior people, maybe the C-suite, are in that frame of work, that they've either got the expertise themselves, or they have somebody on the board who can advise them of, you know, how these risks work. So in a way, it's kind of a godsend for the IT manager, because here I can kind of point out, these are the weaknesses in our environment, or this is where we need to put our effort in, and that kind of goes up then to the senior management to either accept or do something about that.
And it's interesting you mentioned that, because, you know, I'm working with investment boards of some financial investors. And again, you know, in the security commissions in the US are insisting that one of the board have some cyber, are looking for cyber experience on boards, and encouraging that they should have them there, because it raises the investors, you know, profile, and make sure that they're a safe company to work with and invest in. And it's something that, you know, Irish boards are beginning to take a view on. You know, absolutely having that senior management accountability and understanding is really key. And as you say, in the past, the IT manager probably stuck with all the risks. You know, this raises the bar that the people who can influence the company's direction most have the ownership and responsibility for that, which is a really good thing.
Absolutely. One of the things I was just going to say, that you know, new things that are being highlighted, like you look at ISO 27001 has been updated to version 2022, and one of the kind of new things in it is about management, but it's also about things like supply chain management. That the idea, like, we've been through things like solar winds, a lot of companies have had to deal with the log4j, things that are embedded in their systems, and it's not their product, but it actually is something that they're buying from somebody else. So in a way, as you said, because of that supply chain, it's going to have to be verified all the way. So if you get your company up to these standards, you're going to be a good player in that supply chain, and that's, you know, that can only be a good thing for your business and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and again, that's interesting, you know, being on the vendor management piece. Like, it's also the opposite is the case as well. So if I'm delivering our services to one of the critical national infrastructure or the essential entities, I've got to have a level that they're expecting. So they're going to put that in a contract. So if you're doing business with somebody, even if you don't fall under NIS2 compliance requirement directly, Indirectly, you will, because that will be in the tender, that will be in the contract. They will look for those controls to secure their vendors, to make sure that they're, providing the service that they require from their vendors. So it does push the boat out. Like we're saying 4,000 organizations, but with all their suppliers and all the vendors to the different levels, like that, there's a huge amount of organization that indirectly will need to be compliant with NIS2, let's say. And I suppose, if you take, the example of maybe HSE, this is something we want to avoid. That was a huge problem for not just Ireland, but for Europe, and it really made a lot of people stand up and take a view of this whole cyber realm. And being able to bounce back off that, you can see from HSE, it's difficult. Like, in the past, we kind of would say, yeah, something goes wrong, a couple of days, IT will have a rebuilt and we'll be grand, we'll be up and running again. That's not the reality, So maybe you have a view on that, Paul.
Yeah, I agree. Again, it's like in a way, I'm a bit philosophical about it, that we've become a victim in a sense of our own success. We've done so well with digital environments that really we can't run a modern society without them. So you think down to the simple things you do after work today. I'm going to leave work. I'm going to try and head for the train. I'm hoping the train is going to run on time. I'm going to get home. I'm going to put the kettle on. I'm going to turn the tap on to put the water. If none of those things work, life gets very, very difficult. And then if you're in a service where you perhaps need critical medical care or something like that, these are the things we need to run our modern society, hence why they've been given that designation of essential entities or important entities. Without those, without your business, if it's in scope, we can't run our modern world, and it gets really painful for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, and part of that incident reporting, which is another key element of NIS2, is to make sure that you warn other people. So we're reporting, and the timelines are, pretty difficult to meet. I would say 24 hours is a difficult one to try get a report into if you're having a problem. And people are apprehensive about reporting that, and what's the knock on it? It's going to cause me more pain. But it is to be able to get that message across Europe, where HSE are having a problem. Is the other medical entities across Europe are going to have the same problem in the same time, and let's be watching out for that. Let's say, so you're pre-warning, in advance of something happening.
I agree. Just on that, that's an interesting point, is that the NCSE has been designated as the SPOC, the single point of contact for reporting cybersecurity incidents. And there's kind of thresholds, it's not like every time you get a phishing email, you have to get in touch with us or anything like that. But if something happens and it disrupts your business, we need a report on that. And again, it's not the same as publishing it on social media that we have a problem in our business and it goes to the wide world. It's coming into a kind of a confidential, trusted service. And the only reason we're here as the single point of contact is exactly as you said, is to know, is this a one-off event? Or is this affecting multiple organizations? Because if it's affecting multiple organizations, there might be something else afoot that we need to dig in a bit deeper. Because we have, as you know, the environment, the threat landscape is such that we have the opportunists, the script kiddies that we call. We have the kind of ransomware side where financial motivation is it, and then even we're getting into stuff nowadays like espionage and state actors who are trying to disrupt things. All of us start to get alerted now. We think of things like elections coming up and what could happen and the kind of interference that can take place. So it's really so that the NCSE will be this I won't say friendly face, but we're here to help you. It's a service that the government is providing to help keep these essential service running. And as I said, the experts we have here in our operations team, they're some of the best in the country. And while they won't sort of helicopter in to sort the problem out for you, they'll definitely be able to advise you on how to manage the incident and put you in contact with the right people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know some of the players in there, like, they are really good people as well. And I suppose apart from the resilience side or the operational side, there's a technical team there as well. I understand that, can help with malware investigations. If you're hit by malware, to understand how it was created, where it came from, possible indicators of compromise and all, which is really important, be able to spread that across, and that knowledge across different organizations.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That idea of, and again, in turn, the kind of progress of this as we, even as an organization, mature over NIS2 over the next few years, that it's not that the flow of information is going to be one way. It's not that you just it's confession time to the NCSE, but actually we're going to have systems where we can do it the other way. That if we become aware from our European or global partners where we're bringing in threat intelligence, that if it's appropriate, we can share it with your organization or your sector to say, well, this particular thing is being targeted, or it might be, you might have a particular software platform or hardware device that we have the heads up on it, and we can let you know and what you can do to kind of maybe remediate that issue.
Yeah, and I suppose, and that's the important point as well, this is not going to happen overnight. Like NCSE are maturing as an organization. The organizations that are in compliance or have compliance requirements around NIS, absolutely they're going to mature. So you're going to have a baseline at some point, but we're going to a self-assessment question or a gap analysis or something that set that baseline. And then over time, the expectation is you'll get better. Even in small increments, that you'll focus based on risk, which is absolutely key to it. But if you mirror the approach of like the GDPR when it came in, people got frustrated. Nothing was happening. Just to speak, we're after spending loads of money on GDPR. Suddenly there's no fines and whatever. But over time, those fines have crept in. It became more mature. The data protection commissioner has contacted a lot more organizations if issues arise. And I've had some experience with that myself in dealing with different clients. So this will change over time. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. You have to be compliant with NIS2 going forward.
Yeah, I'd agree. And my colleagues who are in the kind of compliance section here in the NCSA, that's the approach that they're going to take. It's not a big bang and kind of come looking for you to see, find the flaws or find the holes that may be there. But it's to kind of help you on that journey of giving you the kind of baby step advice of, okay, what level are you at now? Okay, there's the kind of perfect score, which I don't think we'll ever achieve. I think I read a report there from Singapore says the only way to keep a computer safe is to keep it turned off in its box. That's just the reality of the way it works. So it's this idea, well, can you improve? Just like if you've ever experienced any kind of a cybersecurity audit, generally there's 3 expressions that are used in dealing with you. And it's about, the first one is this: is there a major non-conformance? So basically a standard like ISO or whatever might say you should be doing this, and you have written down in a policy, yes, we do this, but the reality is you're not doing it at all. So that's a major non-conformance. It's a big hole. You might have a minor non-conformance where you say, well, we do a proper, an audit on our access control every 3 months. But the evidence says actually you're only doing it every 5 months. So that's a minor non-conformance. You need to make an improvement there. And then you might just have maybe like an opportunity for improvement. Something, it's not wrong, but you could tweak it and make it a little better. And usually auditors, because they have this view of lots of different organizations, they might be able to give you a lesson learned from another organization. You say, well, I was with a company a few weeks ago and they're doing this and it's working really well for them. So it's all about that sort of sharing best practice and knowledge with one another.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something we've experienced in consultancy as well. It's a big part of consultancy. I've worked with lots of different organizations. Parts of the business are doing good stuff. Like some organizations do vendor management really good. Some do something else really poor. So you take those lessons learned to the next job and you say, like, I've seen this before. This company do it really well. Let's do it that way. And that improves kind of the bench for the new organization. And there's always learning. You're never going to get it perfect. Like there's always, and things change. The environment changes, so you have to react to that and make sure that you're kind of an ongoing, continuous improvement, which is again something that NIS2 is encouraging and bringing forward. So absolutely, there are a lot of positives to it. It is, improving your maturity, your cyber maturity, which is going to make you a more secure business to do business with. So, it has to be good for your business overall.
Now, unfortunately, I was going to just mention one last thing there kind of made me think about it, is that it's not that we don't really want to have any magical thinking, that unfortunately it is going to cost, because it takes time to do all these things. I suppose maybe as an infrastructure manager years ago when I started, all I worried about was like, is the antivirus up to date? And that was as much. Whereas now you're getting into lots more stuff, and that's where things like having a SIEM where you can kind of do a bit of searching, or you've got, maybe if you're fortunate to have a security operations center, it's a whole level that's different. So a lot of CISOs are now, they might be spending 25% of their time on cybersecurity, whereas that wasn't the case in the past. But it's just, it's a bit like we would always try and say that these things they're kind of like a cost of doing business. But on the other hand, if you don't do it, what'll be the cost to your business?
Yeah.
If you're turning over, I don't know, 500,000 every day, and you're off for 5 days, that's really the kind of reality of it.
Yeah, and that's a good point as well, because in traditional kind of business, like years ago, it was bricks and mortar. You had a shop, you rented an office, that was a cost to your business to do business. Now you're in this virtual environment where you still have costs, because you have to protect, in the same way as you protected your shop, you put a burglar alarm on it and all that good stuff to make sure it was secure and your stock was kept. In a modern kind of online environment, you need to have those controls in there also to make sure that whatever you're selling is protected. And one of the other key areas of NIS2, which has really brought something into focus, is OT environments. So, like, I worked with a large pharma, and I briefed them there recently at one of their cyber conferences, and they're really stunned at the fact that OT now has a compliance requirement, which never happened in the past. And the OT process engineers and the automation engineers were all sitting in the room saying, God, what do we have to do for this one? And IT were saying, you've got to work with us, guys. I'm sorry, but it's got to be a team approach. And that's good as well, because typically manufacturing and those industries haven't really been regulated from a cyber point of view, and the spend hasn't been there, but it's really opened the mind of those people too.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Declan. I think I suppose the mindset has to change a little bit, because a lot of operational technology is, when you install it, it stays there till it breaks, and that might be 30 years later. If it's working, don't touch it. Whereas, again, we've seen examples of where threat actors have got in and been able to go laterally across the network because of these devices, because they weren't designed maybe with security in mind. So there's a whole bit of, I suppose one of the main things, and I would have always felt this even in previous roles, that it's kind of knowing your numbers, knowing your assets, and what's plugged into your network and what's it doing. Sometimes people get a surprise, why is that server up? And it can be like, oh, well, I thought that was retired. Somebody must have turned it back on and we didn't know, or some, those kind of things we have to really be on top of now.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, the fundamental of risk management is knowing what you're trying to protect. So if you don't know what you're trying to protect, you can't protect it if you don't know it's there, So it's really important that asset inventory is there and you understand what you're running. I suppose then, just touching on the boardroom accountability, this is a big one. Directors and managers can be held personally liable for failure to comply with NIS2. And that's a big statement, and that's something that, I suppose a lot of boardrooms have taken a view on, and they're really focusing the mind, let's say. So looking at what they need to do, approve the adequacy of cyber risk management measures, supervise to make sure the implementation is working, identify risks and assess cyber security practices, offer training to make sure that their staff are aware of this as well, to have that culture of risk management across the organization. And the key one is to be accountable for non-compliance. So if we don't get it right, that they're accountable ultimately. So it does focus the mind, and that is intentional, I'd imagine, from the standard. Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I suppose at a very high level, this is really to catch, if you think about it, people who are going to be negligent. They know there's a problem and they're ignoring it. And or like in preparing for a call like this, if you had that mindset, well, I'm going to accept all the risks and transfer them across to my cybersecurity insurance. And if something happens, well, that'll just pay for it. But even that won't be able to do anymore. If that was anyway in your mindset, there's this idea of that, you've got to be showing, like with your risk register or your threats and your vulnerability analysis of your own environment, that you know how it works, and you know the risks, and you're doing something about them to mitigate it as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got to take ownership of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose then, we all know, we heard of this top 10 risk management measures. As I said, nothing new here. These are
Mm-hmm.
common things that, most organizations, you probably have most of these in place, maybe not in a structured way, maybe not in a kind of a managed way, but, moving towards that management and maturing with these controls is a good thing. And, absolutely need to get them in place. They're highlighted here for a reason. There's no doubt about that. They're into legislation. And then the penalties, I'd rather the positive on this, to be honest with you, but there are penalties, and absolutely, some of the penalties they're running, from issuing warnings right up to, taking your job away from you if you're on the senior management team and you're not abiding. So any comment on the penalties or?
Yeah, I'll just mention that as you know, any kind of legislation process is very slow, which is why NIS2 as legislation hasn't gone live yet in Ireland. So about 18 months ago, the NIS2 directive was kind of created and issued by the EU. They had set a timeline in place for that, and then on the 17th of this month, the encouragement was to get it into law. Now we've started working seriously on that. It's kind of out of our hands in the NCSE in the sense that it's with government now. It's been debated back and forth in the Dáil and so on. So it'll be going live very shortly. But on October 17th, there the EU what they published what's called the Implementation Act. So the directive existed for 18 months. On October 17th, they published the actual Implementation Act, which is about, this is what you need to put into force. And then what we have to do then is these things about enforcement. So one of the things it might say is in the directive that there's a penalty, but in the law it has to say, well, this is what the penalty will be. And if you don't agree with it or you want to appeal it, how that process would work. So it's kind of a lot of kind of teasing those things out. But to supplement all those things, as I said, what we're doing in the meantime, we're taking it, it's imminently coming. So we've produced that Am I in Scope document to get people started. We've got something in the next week or two. It's just out for comment at the moment, and it's risk management measures. So in the actual Implementation Act, there's articles, 16 articles, and then there's in the appendices, there's the measures. So we've kind of aligned with those and provided going to have this guidance document that you can look at and see, well, what must I do? What should I do? And what could I do? They're all kind of on a gradient of what you can do. And then we're also going to publish, again, nearly ready now, and it's kind of guidelines for SMEs who maybe are smaller organizations. They're looking at this and thinking, I'm going to be overwhelmed, and it'll help them along the way with that. And continuing our kind of presentations around NIS2 and what organizations can do.
Yeah, that's very positive stuff. And then, yeah, just say a practical approach. I mean, you're not going to, if you're a big organization, absolutely you can afford, those the big systems and stuff. If you're a smaller organization, okay, let's put appropriate controls in place, and kind of that language is in there as well. Making sure that the controls are appropriate. We don't want to put you out of business. You want you to be able to continue in business, but continue safely, safely as you can be. Let's say, I suppose.
That's it. And then also that's what's happened as well is that you might have seen Enterprise Ireland have with ourselves or partnered to, there's this kind of scheme where you can apply for a gap analysis, as we were talking about, and there's a grant to help you towards that. And then whatever the gap analysis results in, there's a grant, I think it's of up to 60,000 for organizations to actually put the security measures in place. So I think the fund is about 2 million. So we're, really hopeful that that will help organizations who need to get themselves up to speed in this area, will help them. The other thing I might mention as well in passing is about the reporting. So what we don't want to happen, if you did have an incident where you think it might be an attempted breach or ransomware or something like that, the idea of the 24-hour report within 24 hours is a very, very high level. We have a problem. We don't want people feeling, I have to go and do this report when I should be dealing with the issue. It's keep dealing with the issue, but just an early notification to tell us there's something up. And then if we feel we can help you, we'll jump back in. Or again, after you've had a few days to kind of see where the issue is, we can give us a bit more information. So it's again all about kind of a partnership approach to this to help you get back up and running if there is an issue.
Yeah, I suppose, like, again, back to practicalities, because, even though it's set in law, let's say that you have to report within 24 hours, the level of report, and as you say, you're busy trying to fight the problem. You don't need to be spending time writing a report.
Exactly.
So then, actually, then when you talk about help from National Cyber, this is something that I think that you can you put in place, which is a really positive thing as well.
Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about this. So one of the responsibilities that comes upon us as the NCSE is in Article 29 of NIS2. It says there has to be, it's kind of like member states need to put in place some kind of sector specific information sharing around threat intelligence and that kind of thing. So what we've been working on as a project, and it's really going quite well at the moment, is to establish what we've decided to brand as cores. So there's coordination and response network. So the idea is that each sector will have a core, a group of businesses, government departments, whatever they are, and that they will kind of, we're going to provide or have provided a collaboration tool that we can stay in touch with each other and advise each other of things that are going on. Regular, maybe quarterly meetings to kind of talk about issues that you might be facing. We have representatives from our operations team can come and tell you a bit about the threat landscape and what's going on and what you can do to protect yourself. So that's kind of it's in its infancy. But as you can see, we've got N-Core, which is for the energy sector. So we have electricity providers, gas providers, renewables, all that sort of thing working together. Education is all the kind of universities, third level research institutions. DigiCore is digital providers, telecoms, things like that. LG is local government, so all the 31 county councils. Healthcore, obviously pharmaceuticals, hospitals, critical care facilities. MoveCore, transport, ports, airports, all those kind of things. And then GovCore is for government departments and their agencies. So in all of those, we're going to have this kind of ecosystem where these cores work separately. They can help each other because they're sector specific, but we'll also be having arrangements where there can be a bit of cross-pollination, as it were, and sharing information across those things. So it's kind of early days, but it's going to be really good and going to be very helpful. I think one of the things I've noticed in visiting and kind of attending these various cores is that you might have people say, or companies say, in DigiCore, so they're in the comms business, and outside of the core meeting, they're competitors in business. They're obviously chasing the same customers sometimes, but in the room to do with cybersecurity, we're all in this together, and it's a common problem that we're all facing, and we're able to help each other while keeping it confidential and trustworthy. And even if, say, the Move core wanted to share something with a different core, we can do that in an anonymous way. So you give us the problem, but not necessarily who it is or what your infrastructure is or things like that. So it's really trying to get the really important information out and across to people who might need it.
Yeah, and I've come across that previously when in consultancy where, some sectors really would like to get something like this off the ground because they see it's a good thing to do, to be able to talk across health, to be able to talk about across, different sectors of business. So, having this coordinated centrally is absolutely brilliant, because, it's something that was needed, and it's something that you can share information. As you said, if you have a problem, even anonymously, you can bring it up into one of these core meetings and see how it could be addressed.
Absolutely. That's it. And then, of course, other parts of the NCSE are working on things like certification that companies can get involved in, and education is another part of it as well. Even down to not only increasing the pool of people who have cybersecurity skills, but professionalizing them even more. That's another area that we're working on to help with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, sometimes you don't market yourselves enough, let's say, because maybe people aren't aware of these initiatives that are out there, and these kind of webinars like this probably help to raise that, and then bring it across to different people across sectors. I suppose again, and I suppose on the ECHO approach, you mentioned the gap analysis. So our gap analysis we've developed just a while back. To provide a measure of your maturity, and what we'd always try to do in our assessments from ECHO are, base it on some sort of framework, base it on something that's already there. We're not kind of to recreate the wheel, let's say. So we stick to something that we know, stick to something that's smart people have put together, and it makes sense. So our kind of first approach is to use the CSF2, the NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2. NIST Cybersecurity Framework 1.1 was used in the NIS2 kind of self-assessment questionnaire as the basis for that. So we chose the CSF2 for NIS2. Again, it's just added governance in there in CSF2 and made it probably a little bit more Englishy to be able to understand the terms in there, because NIS1 or CSF1 was a little bit more difficult to interpret, I'd say, for some organizations. So what we do use this as our kind of cyber maturity baseline, and also for NIS2 compliance, and in a sense also for DORA compliance, because it kind of is a good measure across all the different controls you might have in place to see where you are. And that sets a baseline of where you are, and it shows then, if you want to brief your board, it shows a lovely graph of where you're in all of these different controls and where you're spending money, and how after 6 months or a year those controls have improved. So it's a good thing in any case. As I said, it has governance in there, identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, the usual kind of stuff in there. 22 categories, 106 kind of controls in there that you're going to measure against. And we measured on a CMM basis at a 1 to 5 to say, we don't say you're compliant or non-compliant. We're saying with this control, you're at a level 3. Level 3 is it's in place and it's not too bad. Level 4 is it's in place and being measured. Level 5 is, the state of the art, it's continuous improve, measured, and all that kind of good stuff, So, it's a good approach. It's a good approach from the sense of understanding your maturity overall. So it's something that we need to do. And again, it'll evolve, as you said, if a new approach is taken to do these audits, or, the gap analysis, let's say we move with whatever National Cyber is suggesting. And I think you had some view on that, like trying to, I know there are a number of national competent authorities, and the government has federated that audit process for NIS2. Maybe you could have a conversation around that.
Yeah, I can tell you a bit about that. So the NCSE is going to be the coordinator of the national competent authorities. So we, as ourselves, have the task of dealing with government departments and their agencies. So we have to kind of watch ourselves in a way, which is kind of an interesting one that we're going to work on. And then what's happened then is that there will be competent authorities that are sector specific. So you're going to have, for example, over the digital space, you'll be Comreg and various other organizations. But the thing we're working on with those as partners is that we want them all to approach the compliance in a kind of a fair and transparent way. We don't want one competent authority, say that's over the energy sector, to be very, very strict, and another competent authority over another area to be lesser. So we don't want to water down the standard in any way, but we want to be able to help people to drive it up. We're not looking for people to fail them, as it were, so that an issue can happen, but it's actually to help them move along. So that's what those competent authorities are kind of working away at the moment. As I said, we in turn here will probably end of quarter one, quarter two next year, have to give a report to Europe to say, these are all the companies that have registered in Ireland. These are the sectors that they fall in, and this is the relationship that we're building with them, and so on. So we have a bit of work to do over the next few months as well in that space. So, as I said, pretty soon the registration portal will open on the NCSE's website, and then you'll have the ability then, once you're kind of approved and in the system, to be able to do those incident reports, and we'll be able to kind of build up a bit of a picture of what's going on in the national infrastructure.
And I think that was a question as well from a lot of clients and a lot of people I spoke to. What if I just don't bother? What if nobody's telling me I'm NIS2 compliance requirement. Nobody has stuck the finger in the wound and said, yeah, you're in. So a lot of people probably hanging back and saying, yeah, well, if somebody comes and tells me, I'll do it, but I'm not going to volunteer.
Yeah, I suppose, again, as we said, as we mature and we kind of get a grip on what this involves in, we'll come looking for you. If you're definitely in scope and you're providing, like what you definitely don't want to happen is to be one of these essential entities or important entities and have an issue, and then it all come to light. It's much better to be in and kind of be part of the arrangement, because that's where the resources and the help are going to come from. If you bury your head in the sand, you're not really doing yourself any favors, because you kind of can't get away with it. Like we say, we often joke about how the world works, and in America or the USA, what do they say? America or USA innovates and Europe legislates. So, like, in a way, that's hard, but it gives us, like you said, I think that's a really important pitch that you started off saying, that we're trying to make Ireland Inc. a really safe place to work. That, if you want to bring your business here or you want us to do something for you, our environment is really secure. And that's really what companies are going to look for going forward. They're going to look for that. That's why, in some ways, GDPR has been so successful, because now, before we ever start building software or putting a process in place, we're doing a data protection impact assessment to know, well, where's the data going to be? Where's it going to reside? Is it going to be in Europe? Is it going to be, who's going to process it? How long are we going to keep it for? So there's a lot of thought goes in before we actually do something. And this is going to be maybe not as impactful, but certainly similar. And just as a side point, today the Department of Defence have issued, they're bringing in some legislation around what we're talking about with NIS is cyber security protection, but the Department of Defence are talking about sort of physical security of everything. So that's going to be an interesting one, and they'll kind of dovetail together, no doubt, as they come along.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, don't bury your head in the sand. You can't avoid it. It is the law. And the last thing you want to do is have an incident or breach and suddenly discover, God, I'm supposed to be compliant with NIS2. I'm not. I haven't done all this. So you look back through the legislation and pick the areas where you breached already. So not only had you got a breach, but now you have a lot of problems and fines and stuff, and bad press and bad brand from everybody. And then, absolutely a positive thing. We do need to have Ireland being a place to do business. We do need your company to be a good company to do business. And as I said, in ECHO, we're embracing that. In a sense, we're going to be an essential entity. That we see that as great, because we can go to companies who are in our clients and say, you know what, we're already in the mix. We're in that journey with you if you're in NIS2 compliant organization. So we understand what you're going through, and we're happy to help. And then again, on the help, both yourselves and ourselves, we're here to help. Practical approach. We don't expect you to be perfect day one. I don't think. I think that's the kind of a ethos of any legislation coming from Europe. We want to set a baseline and move that bar up over time.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So again, it's kind of baby steps, simple. It might be like I would say again, what I mentioned it earlier. It's kind of down to kind of basic housekeeping to start with. Have you got an asset inventory? Do you know where everything is? Are you using kind of good access control? Are you implementing it? All of those kind of putting the tools away after you use them. It's all that sort of tidiness type thing of knowing your environment. Because one of the things, like, again, in the past, I've seen organizations where there was a big rush to put things in the cloud, thinking that if I put it in the cloud, it'll look after itself. But it's very easy to misconfigure something and you expose yourself then. So again, it's this idea of, trying to have attention to detail is going to save you in these areas.
Yeah, and it's nice that you mentioned that as well, because like the thing we were encouraging our clients to do is to align at least what ISO or a standard, like ISO 27001 gives you the structure, gives a risk management at its core, management buy-in is in there, all the good things that you're looking for on NIS2, but they're all the good things of a cyber mature organization. I mean,
absolutely.
And it's putting a structure that in the long term and ongoing, you're going to continuously improve and you're going to keep in compliance with not just NIS2, but any other compliance requirement you have, because they're all bundled in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anybody on the webinar today has a question about NIS2, they can contact us. We have a dedicated email address that the engagement team monitor. And if we're able to help you, we certainly will, or we'll make stuff available, as I said, as it comes online.
Absolutely. So I suppose that the first piece of that puzzle is to try to figure out, what gaps are there, what you're missing, and try to do that gap analysis, I suppose, to get you on that journey. Well, I suppose the first thing is to jump on some of these webinars and understand what the journey is like.
Yeah.
And then I suppose we're onto maybe some questions. I'm not sure, Kirsten, if some more questions have come in.
We had a few come in, and as I said, there some were submitted before the webinar. If anybody does have any more, please do. We've got about 10 minutes left, so please pop them in. But the first question I will start with, there's some that are very specific to organizations, so that it might actually be useful to somebody else who's in that organization. What sort of impacts will NIS2 have specifically on healthcare organizations and additional requirements that might arise from this?
Well, no matter what kind of an organization you are, the articles, if you like, are the same, and the risk management measures are going to be the same. It depends on how far you want to take it. But again, what we're going to do, the National Competent Authority for, say, the health sector will be reaching out very shortly to all those organizations to kind of start a few workshops around this, and and we as the NCSE will be involved with that as well, and to help you on that journey of knowing exactly what's involved. Again, I'll be quite honest with you, we're learning as we go as well. It's kind of something that it's a kind of an organic thing, and we're seeing the implementations. Like, there can be sometimes companies that seem to kind of fall between two stools that the legislation or the directive didn't really think about, maybe. So we're going to kind of tease those things out as time goes on.
And I suppose then in health as well, we kind of forget that health is a huge OT environment. Yep. I mean, like, it's no point in having your IT server up and it's up and running and all the risks are done there and you can't get an X-ray because the X-ray machine is down. Mm-hmm. So like there will be a focus in health on all the OT environment, all those machines, the X-ray machines, the assessment machines, the MRI machines, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And some of them, as you say, their legacy is a different environment, it's a different focus. You're looking at availability of the machine, not the data or the confidentiality of the machine, let's say, I suppose, as a focus. So, it's a different environment, but you do need to work with your IT area, so the process and automation engineer or the guy who understands that department. You need to work with your IT department and then come to a middle ground, let's say.
That's it.
Brilliant. Another couple of questions, a lot of questions in on whether they fall in scope. So for instance, what qualifies as an essential service? Someone is a surveyor, they consider themselves essential, but perhaps not everybody agrees. Similar question on, is there any scope for insurance brokers or underwriters, because they don't seem to be listed under that link. So maybe you could explain, if you're not listed under that link or you don't know, what do people do?
Again, in the financial sector, it is slightly different, because we were talking with the central bank yesterday actually about this, that it's like things like credit unions, insurance brokers, will they be covered by DORA, which is a similar legislation, but it's particularly specific to the financial sector. So again, on the NCSE's website, if you find that tool, Am I in Scope, and just go through the questions and see, now 99% of the time, it'll give you, yes, you are, or no, you're not, or you're an essential entity, important entity. There are going to be some that the logic can't really pick up what it is, and if you want to send us an email, we'll have a look individually at that. But again, there's no panic. It's early days, and the information will be becoming more available as it settles down.
I suppose it's a very broad law. It has to deal with all sorts of organizations across Europe. So you can't have it really specific and detailing exactly every type of manufacturing or entity that's out there. So I've had recently with some clients who have a number of organizations across Europe, 26 or 27 different organizations, to manufacture, the research, to do nutritional food, to do all sorts of different things. And they really had to take in legal aspect on what exactly are we as an organization? What do we do? What sector do we sit in? So some of them can get quite complicated. As you said, 90% of them are black and white. We're in, we're a managed service provider. We sit in this box. We're good.
Yeah.
But I suppose error on the side of caution, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And like there's even the kind of unusual situation where an organization, because of its diverse portfolio, if you like, might come under two different authorities for different parts of the business. So again, those things will be ironed out over the next number of months.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Again, just on that, this might be very specific, but does baby wipes manufacturers fall under the pharma criteria for NIS2?
I knew you'd give me a question. I wouldn't. That's an interesting one.
Well, I suppose you kind of addressed it earlier, that it's kind of one of those things where not every single industry has been put into the one. So maybe that's a question for the rest of the team. We might actually get back to that question then, if you could maybe find that out, specifically. That's great. And again, on those.
Sorry, quite often there's European legislation which defines what an organization is. So there are, like, if you look in the NIS2, there are references to European legislation about types of industries and types of stuff. So you might get the answer there, but it's a very legalistic interpretation of do I fall? And some it's on the fence. I mean, some of them are still, even with a legal interpretation, they can't make a call. Like I say, well, I think it looks like it should be in, but maybe not. So, but as I say, maybe. The key thing is not to bury your head in the sand and to contact National Cyber and say, okay, I'm not sure if I'm in. Maybe you can have a view on this, and then you get a kind of interpretation from themselves.
Yeah,
exactly.
And you're tackling it head on, as you guys have said.
Yeah.
Is having a SOC or an MXDR service part of the standard?
It's mentioned. It is there. It's probably in that realm of it. It's a should. So it's, if you can do it, fantastic. Again, it depends on the size of your organization, because there's a lot in the legislation about proportionality. The idea of you've got it. That's why I suppose when these things are put together, it's very outcome focused. So we want your environment to be secure, but how you do that, only because you know your environment really well. There's no point, and we couldn't do it in any way, us recommending, well, use this vendor's product and that'll solve your problem for you, because we don't have the expertise to know that. So it's about you understanding your environment and finding the appropriate ones. And as I said, that guidance that we're going to publish in the next week or two has those musts, shoulds and coulds of how you can approach doing those things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's appropriate control. So it is all risk based. So if you think the risk is so high that I need a SOC in place because of the size of my organization and the complexity of how we work, absolutely, but it's a control that you make that call on, because you're the one best placed to understand your own risks and understand the treatments that will make them work for you.
And this is where what we started off talking about was how senior management understand all that and are making the decision.
Absolutely.
This next question has come in a couple of times. I'll go with the way this one is worded because it kind of covers a range of things. So it's a question for both of you. What is the current view on the majority of organisations and entities that have fallen short and behind on NIS2 directive timeline? What kind of implications will this have across the country and Europe? Will it be postponed or imposed?
Well, the regulation or the legislation, so we have a directive which has become an implementation act, which is going to become legislation or law. So it is coming, no getting away from it. So, like, again, we don't want to water down the standard, but we do understand it's going to take time to mature in these spaces. So, and the help will all be there. See, it's kind of like the way things have happened that we've become accustomed to. It's like if you have a car and you have the NCT on the car. Don't you remember before NCT? You didn't get it. You know what it was like. And now, would you go on Dundee and would you buy a 2-year-old car that didn't have an NCT? You'd kind of be saying, oh, I don't really want to do that. So it's almost along those lines, that it's a way of verifying that all is, not that all is perfect, but that you're doing everything you can to keep things secure. So it is coming. It's just as well to buy into it, even if you're not in scope. The guidelines and the principles are really good practice. Almost as you said, Declan, there, bringing you up to like an ISO standard almost, if you can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like maturing your cyber, like, makes sense in any business, modern business. That's the way we have to do. You're going to have a data breach. Can you bounce back after something that NIS2 is core? It's at its core. Something that DORA is at its core as well. The Operation Resilience Act. So, it's really, you need to be able to bounce back when you have a problem, and you need to understand the problem, and then, hopefully get help because you're sharing information with other groups and stuff, and maybe get a tip off quite early. So, you're watching out for these things. So all in all, improving our own maturity across Europe and across Ireland, across your own organization,
That's it.
I've 2 more questions if I can nab you for the next 2 minutes. So I'll finish with this other one. Okay, so could you provide a view on the potential reoccurring supervision activities by NCSE acting as a competent authority?
Right. So I think what's been asked is kind of how frequently would an audit happen and things like that. So again, it's been teased out at the moment, but I suppose again from us, we would be taking a risk-based approach to this too. So we'll be looking at who are the organizations in our remit. We're probably going to spend time with the big players, the ones who have major infrastructure. So probably if you're the energy provider for a huge part of the country, we're going to be, because if you go down, there's big issues. And then work our way down, kind of prioritizing the companies. And then the competent authorities will be the same. They will be kind of prioritizing who will we do, who will we visit. Some of it will be self-reporting. If you a bit like if you applied for cyber insurance, you'd be asked, fill in this document and tell us what your environment is like, and then they base their premium on what you've told them. So in the same way, we think that would be the approach that would be used for organizations.
Good stuff. We'll go with this last question unless anybody has anything else, or we can get to those questions directly. Size is considered in the definition of in-scope entities. Is being in scope based on size only or on a mix of size and sectors?
It's to do with size and turnover and sector, those 3 things. And it's a mix of them as to whether you're essential or important.
But it's not set in stone either, because
exactly.
there are organizations who are critical to Ireland, that might have 10 employees and a small turnover who provide a service that's absolutely critical to everybody. So, the government can declare that you have a compliance requirement under NIS2 if they feel you're of a level who you're important to the country.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, look, there was one or two that were kind of more specific to their industry, and I think the answer might still be the same. You know, if you're unsure and it's very specific, get in touch with the NCSE directly, and maybe you guys can help them out.
Be happy to help. Yeah.
Brilliant. I can send on the email address on the next email where we send on the recording and everything, for you guys to contact the NCSE directly, or of course, please reach out to us and we can kind of help as much as we can. We will be working, you know, with you guys, I'm sure. But I think we might leave it there.
Absolutely, and great to interact, Paul. You know,
it's great pleasure to be here today.
Connection to National Cyber, you know, to help out, like, and it's great to see that positive input, like, and the practical input as well to, you know, this compliance requirement. You know, it's a pain for everybody, a cost to everybody, but you know, there are positives. You know.
Yeah. Well, I have a feel. I feel in the National Cyber Security Centre is going to become a household name going forward, because it's just part of the modern world, isn't it, to protect our environments and protect our country.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great stuff. Thanks very much.
Thank you both. Thank you both for speaking. Thanks to everybody who stuck around. And yeah, have a great day. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.